My Hero Academia, all grown up. Chapter 42. I would fire that person. The room was silent for a full minute before Edshot sighed deeply and leaned back into his chair. You two have put me in a very tough position. I hope you know that. Uraraka didn't realize that tears had begun to well up in her eyes as she blinked back. Saying the words themselves felt like she was tying her own noose, but Edshot's sudden shift in attitude seemed to contradict that. You both deserve to be reprimanded. That much is reasonable to say. Edshot glanced back over at Bakugou. Especially you, Ground Zero. If I didn't have the media threatening to break down the doors to my agency right now, I would have sent you packing the moment you arrived here this morning. That being said, he trailed off and glanced between them, a conflict battling itself out behind his eyes. Neither of you are getting fired. Uraraka released a massive breath and hurriedly wiped at the tears dripping from her eyes. Thank you so much, Edshot. I am so sorry for the trouble I have caused you. I just want you to know that I will dash. I'm not finished yet, Uravity. Edshot held up a silencing hand and softly shook his head at her. I expect far more out of you both. He turned his attention to the blonde. Ground Zero, I cannot even begin to express my frustration with your display of character over the last few months. Like Uravity, you have been unapologetically rash and irresponsible. Of all the heroes that I employ, you are the one that is supposed to set an example. A standard. You're a top graduate of UA and you have flown up through the ranks, relying almost entirely on your skills and instincts. You need to begin fleshing out the other skills that a hero needs. Bakugou resisted the urge to scoff irritably, forcibly reminding himself that he's on thin ice already. I don't know what the hell you want from me. I didn't ask to be an example. But you are, Edshot responded assertively. Starting today, you will report directly to me and you will never exclude details. You will be perfectly honest, and you'll be expected to represent the agency as a whole, including myself. That means talking to the media as well as taking charge of day-to-day operational management. Bakugou blinked back dumbly. The hell? Edshot gave him a grim look. You're going to lead the day's shift. You'll make all the patrol assignments, you'll lead the brief, and you'll be responsible for all pertinent needs and problem-solving that are brought to your attention. You will also be required, and this is non-negotiable, to be an active participant in team-building exercises. Are you fucking serious? Bakugou gave his boss a disgusted look. You're giving me a promotion? A punishment in the form of a promotion. Edshot held Bakugou's fierce gaze with ease. Of course, you'll have to serve out your suspension first. Uraraka suddenly found herself squeaking in surprise. Suspension? Edshot turned his head toward her. Yes, a suspension. You'll both be placed on an unpaid suspension for 1 week. You will not be permitted to come to work whatsoever, nor will you be allowed to work privately on the Viper case unless I authorized it. But before you think this will be time off for you both to kick your feet up, there is a serious caveat. What the hell would that be? Bakugou scowled in response, the promotion still rolling around in his head. He'd always figured that he'd end up in charge one day, but the act of actually having to do it sounded, well, awful. You're going to spend all that time entertaining the media. Edshot shrugged nonchalantly. Interviews, close-ups, photo shoots, whatever they want. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And while you're at it, you'll make sure to emphasize that your success and popularity couldn't be achieved without the Edshot agency's backing. That is how you can make this up to me. Bakugou took a deep but scornful breath. So what then? Are we going to have to break up or some shit? Edshot paused as he glanced back over at Uraraka. You will be permitted to date one another until the Viper case has concluded. Once he is in custody, we will revisit the topic of transferring. It would make the agency look bad if I took my 2-star players off the field in their shining moment. You both have done all the legwork on this case, so it is not my place to take that away from you and hand it to someone else. Uraraka bowed her head. Thank you so much, Edshot. This means so much to us both. You have no idea. Uravity, Edshot reached up to rub one of his temples. You need to take some time during the suspension to figure out what kind of hero you really want to be. I'll only put up with indecision for so long. I expect more out of you than a few solid captures. I want to see you getting your feet wet here in Tokyo. Find some leads, get a CI, hit the gym, whatever it takes to get yourself up to par again. You have attacked that ground zero lacks, and that is an enormous strength, but you need to put more effort into putting punch behind that. If you want to move up in the ranks, you need to stop relying so heavily on others. Learn to trust yourself and your skills. Uraraka stared wide-eyed back at him, letting his criticism and advice sink in before she softly nodded her head and muttered a reply. Yes, sir. All right. Adshot slowly rose out of his chair and looked down at them. I'm sick of looking at you both. Go grab your things and go home. The PR director will call you this afternoon to schedule all of your media appearances. He turned toward his desk before pausing and looking back at them, and for the love of all might, please make yourselves presentable. Uraraka scrambled to her feet while Bakugou took a more lackadaisical approach to leaving. They both muttered a few jumbled words of thanks before moving toward the door. Bakugou was holding it open for Uraraka when Adshot spoke up from his seat at his desk. By the way, congratulations to you both. Adshot didn't bother looking up from the papers in front of him. You two are a good match. I'm happy for you. Uraraka and Bakugou glanced at each other in confusion before the brunette smiled happily. Thank you, sir. And thank you for giving us a second chance. Enough. Adshot waved a hand at them. Get out of my sight. Without another word, the two left, shutting the door behind them quietly. Adshot finally looked up once he heard the click of the door. He took a long, deep breath and leaned back in his chair hard. Sometimes being the boss sucked, but once the hard part was over, there would be room left for growth and understanding. He just hoped that both of the young heroes under his purview were capable of living up to his expectations. After all, the hopes for them were quite high. All right, just one more. Bakugou was considering blowing his brains out with an explosion as he leaned stiffly against the railing on top of a bridge. His arms were crossed over his chest, and he clenched his jaw in irritation as the photographer dropped down on one knee to get a photograph looking up at him. We've been doing this shit for hours. Don't you have enough? The photographer shrugged as he stood up straight again. Well, we're doing a full spread on you guys, so the more we have to work with, the better. Oh, come on. Uraraka piped up from her place behind the photographer. I think you look super handsome in that suit. Can't you smile just a little bit? The blonde felt a spike of irritation at her teasing tone. Fuck no. Who the hell do you think I am, round face? Uraraka didn't hesitate as she took a few steps toward him, closing the distance between them by more than half. What about for me? She pulled her phone out of her purse and wiggled it in front of him. Can we take a selfie together? He glanced between the phone and her face a few times before hardening his features. Pass. What dash? She dropped her jaw in dismay. Why not? He sniffed at her. It's fucking weird. It is not weird. Uraraka huffed at him. It's normal for couples. He stiffened a bit before remembering that he and Uraraka were in fact dating each other now. He rolled his head on his shoulders uncomfortably, aware of the photographer listening quietly. Maybe later. Oh. The brunette visibly pouted. But we're both so dressed up. She looked down at her beautiful cocktail dress. It was a soft, cloudy pink with a mature cut and length. It was an elegantly adorable dress, and she couldn't wait to see how the professional photos turned out. He didn't have to use much brain power to sense her disappointment before he audibly growled in disdain. Fuck, fine. Get over here. Really? She brightened up immediately, but after the brief moment of surprise passed, she scuttled over to him with a wide smile. Never mind. Forget I asked that. Just smile, okay? She bumped shoulders with him as she got close and held her phone out at arm's length. Say cheese. Bakugou barely had a second to think before she was snapping a series of photos. Her excitement alone was enough to make the corners of his mouth slightly turn upward, but once the shadow of a smile graced his face, it was halted and shunned back into hiding. He could see her massive smile through the screen, and he found himself looking at that instead of the camera. The shutter of a lens broke his attention away, and he looked sharply over at the photographer. Do you guys want a full-length picture? Bakugou glowered at the man that was still holding his camera in his hands. He'd had a humored smirk on his face as he watched them take the selfies. Yes, please. Uraraka excitedly handed her phone off to him before she settled back into Bakugou's side. Should we do the same pose from earlier? I'm really not sure how this sort of thing works. Sure, The photographer took a few steps back and held up the phone. Ground zero. Why don't you put your right hand in your pocket and Uravity? Could you set your hand on his chest? Yes, just like that. Before Bakugou knew it, the photographer had captured 3 pictures of them, and he was counseling Uraraka on how to filter the photographs for her social media. All the blonde could do was stand idly by and feel like a complete dumbass. The entire week had been one uncomfortable experience after another. The first 2 days had been especially terrible. Edshot had taken special care to ensure that they had a packed schedule of press-related events. He'd suffered through the most menial media attention to interviews that made him want to burn the entire studio down. In retrospect, this photo shoot was one of the more emotionally manageable tasks. However, it didn't detract from how frustrated he felt. Uraraka, on the other hand, was the shining media star that he had kind of figured she would be. Everyone adored her and fawned over her, paying her high compliments as they took turns dressing her up like a doll. She was effortlessly charismatic during their interviews and naturally stunning in all the photographs. Bakugou wasn't the least bit jealous of that trait, but it did make him feel a bit like her mutt that she happened to bring along with her. More than anything, he felt like he was getting in her way, and while he was more than happy to stand aside, his obligation to Edshot didn't allow that. However, he had quickly learned that Uraraka didn't feel the same way. She had doted on him in a way only he could see. She soaked up the media attention on both their parts, helping Bakugou to avoid questions that made him irritable and politely critiquing designers that tried to dress him in things that made him uncomfortable. If anything, she was constantly helping him relax into their media role while simultaneously praising him during conversations and propping up his success in a way that made him almost seem humble. He couldn't figure out how she managed to do it so effortlessly, and that made him admire her more. She really was leaning into being his personal cheerleader, and damn it, he loved it. Once he caught himself circling the mushy thoughts in his head, he shoved them away and yanked his phone out of his pocket. He leaned his back against the railing of the bridge as he looked down at his messages. He'd gotten one earlier that morning from his informant that was doing nothing but irritating him. "Haven't seen you in a while. You're missing out." He hadn't responded, but he knew what the text meant. His informant had something to tell him, but his deal with Edshot prohibited any hero work for 3 more days. He frowned at the screen for a while longer before opening another set of messages, pausing for a long moment before typing out a text. "My CI has info." He stared at the message for a long moment before shrugging internally and pressing send. It annoyed him that he felt like he had to ask in order to do his damn job, but he was already walking a fine line. Edshot had made it clear that he had to step up his game, and after some consideration over the last 4 days, Bakugou had decided to take that challenge head-on. The phone vibrated again a few seconds later, and he looked down to see the response. "Does it have anything to do with this?" He blinked at the message for a moment before a photograph came through. He frowned at the phone as he clicked to enlarge it. It was a somewhat blurry picture of cars stuck in traffic, but one car in particular caught his eye. A black town car in the center lane with dark, tinted windows. However, the photograph was taken at the convenient angle that showed through the untinted windshield. Behind the driver, there was a man with the collar of a trench coat pulled up high against the sides of his face. The picture itself was blurry, but after a long moment of staring, Bakugou knew in his gut that the man was Viper. He quickly returned back to his messages to type out a fast reply. "Where the hell did you get that?" It was killing him that he was stuck on that bridge while his colleagues were working the Viper case without him. He went back to looking at the photo and wondered how they had managed to get it. He looked at the surroundings of the picture, but didn't recognize them. All he could tell was that it was taken in Tokyo, indicated by a city cab behind Viper's town car. "Go see your CI and show him this. See what he says." Bakugou's pride immediately swelled up in his chest. Despite his punishment, Edshot was going to allow him to work the lead. He looked up at Uraraka to find that she was still talking with the photographer, but once their eyes met, he knew that she could see the serious nature of his expression. "What's up?" She shrugged off the other man and walked over to the blonde. Bakugou didn't reply, instead passing the phone off to her, so she could read the messages. He watched her as she clicked on the photo herself and stared at it with a puzzled look. After an embarrassingly long moment passed, he took a deep breath and spoke up. "Black car, round face." She zoomed in on the picture and looked hard at it for another handful of seconds before her eyes widened. Is that who I think it is? It has to be. Bakugou grabbed the phone back. Did you read the rest? Yeah. She looked up to give him a passive look. I guess that I'm a little surprised. The blonde shrugged it off. It's probably because they're all completely inept at this shit without me or you there. Well, Uraraka started, but the photographer cut her off. I think we're finished up here. He looked down at the screen of his camera. Your agent has another television appearance scheduled for you both in 2 hours, so I don't think I can keep you any longer. I'm sure what we have will work great. Bakugou audibly growled at the thought of being around any more media plebs, but Uraraka placed a hand on his arm with a subtle tenderness. She smiled up at him before speaking. Why don't you go get some ramen, and I'll go ahead without you on this one. I can handle it on my own. He looked down at her sincere expression for a long time before nodding once. Yeah, whatever. I'm sick of those TV assholes anyway. I know you are, believe me. Uraraka laughed lightly as she patted his arm. Let's go then, okay? Yeah. Normalcy felt a little strange after the last few days he'd had with Uraraka, but Bakugou tried not to dwell on it as Kirishima babbled beside him. They'd met up shortly after he had left Uraraka to fend for herself against the media, and they were nearing the familiar noodle house. He hadn't spent much time with Kirishima over the last few weeks, and as much as he hated to admit it to himself, he missed the damn bastard. Anyway, Kirishima sighed as he said the word, it sucks having to lead the case without you there. I'm not cut out for this sort of thing. You don't have to tell me that shit. Bakugou scoffed his response as he tucked his hands in his jean pockets. You're the fucking hype man, and I am the genius. That's how this shit works. Kirishima immediately punched Bakugou on the shoulder. Oh, so that's all I've been denigrated to? Your hype man? I'll have you know that it was under my leadership that we managed to get our hands on that lead in the first place. Bakugou scoffed haughtily. So, you get one shitty picture that might prove that Viper is in Tokyo again, and suddenly you're the mastermind behind the entire operation? That's not leadership, that's just lucky. Asshole. Kirishima cackled and shook his head. Damn, I've missed you, dude. You've been such a pain in the ass for the last few months that I was beginning to worry it would stick. Bakugou tossed a miffed glare at his friend and partner. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Kirishima smirked. I never thought my little Bakugou would ever graduate to being Katsuki, but I have to say, you've made me a very proud best buddy. A deadly silence passed between them as Bakugou flexed his fingers. He couldn't help but chuckle darkly to himself at the irony of it all. You looking to get choked out? Kirishima waggled his eyebrows. Is that a promise? The moment the question dropped from his lips, he was backing away, waving his hands across his face. Whoa, dude. I'm just messing with you. Bakugou had taken a bold sidestep in his friend's direction, a murderous glint in his eye. You're pushing your damn luck right now, Kirishima. Keep that up. I fucking dare you. Now isn't the time or the place for fulfilling your fantasies, Bakugou. Kirishima nodded behind the blonde. We're here. Bakugou disregarded Kirishima's acknowledgement and cracked his knuckles with a grin. I disagree. It's always a good time to kick your ass. Kirishima chortled at Bakugou's tough guy act. I mean, sure. If you're looking to get your suspension extended, we can make that happen. But let's wait to do that until after we've gotten our information from your informant, huh? Bakugou didn't get the chance to reply before the redhead was blowing by him and ducking into the alleyway behind the ramen restaurant. He growled irritably before turning on his heel and storming after his partner, grumbling promises to make Kirishima pay later. They wandered down the alleyway until they caught sight of a hooded figure leaned against the side of a dumpster, bouncing a ball against the opposite wall. He didn't look up at them as they approached. Used to look like L. Well, you're one to fucking talk. Bakugou shot back rudely. What the hell do you want? The informant continued to throw the ball across the alley, catching it easily as it bounced back. Congrats on your love. Both heroes looked surprised, glancing at each other, but Kirishima chuckled, realizing that Bakugou was still unaware of his relationship with Mina. Yeah, it only took round 020 or so years to discover romance, but once he did, he managed to capture himself a solid 10, huh? Shut the fuck up. Bakugou glared at his counterpart. We didn't come here to talk about Uravity. What do you have for us? He turned back to the informant. She's pretty. The informant commented with a shrug before tossing the ball again. Viper says so too. He's wonderin' about her. His poison gas kills Irion. Even stricter. But her? Nothin'. Walkin' upright and going to work. Bakugou angrily snatched the ball as it bounced back to the informant. Teller said the same shit before I kicked his ass all the way to jail. Does Viper wonder about that shit too? I'll bet the asshole is counting his days, scared shitless about when he'll come face to face with me. The informant laughed loudly, unafraid of who might hear it. Do you remember last time? Viper ain't scared. No, he don't give a shit about you, Zero. He held out his hand, asking for the ball back. Bakugou held it up and squeezed it, considering bursting it in his palm. He better start worrying for his own skin instead of getting too curious about some shit that doesn't matter. He slammed the ball back down into the open palm of his informant. Or, getting fucking pervy about my girlfriend. Kirishima sensed that the conversation was turning sour, so he stepped in. You've been in contact with Viper directly? Shake-ups. The informant shrugged and tossed the ball between his two hands. You know. Stricter and cameo gone and Teller being a dumbfuck. Viper is gettin' antsy and whatnot. Losing control of his guys. He needs guys he can trust. Like a fucking cornered animal, Bakugou gloated, suddenly pleased that he'd managed to effectively nudge the Mamushi group closer to chaos. You got something for us, or did you just want to talk shop? The informant angled his head so that his mouth could be seen under the hood, a small smile on his lips. Just wanted to congratulate you on your love. Zero. I've been missin' ya. So you're wasting our fucking time. Bakugou grunted and tensed his shoulders. Of course you fucking are. Is this a trap? He glanced back down the alleyway before looking up. The ball hit the wall again, bringing both heroes' attention back to the informant. You're on the television all the time. Too busy. Never workin'. You lettin' Viper go now, eh? Fuck no. Bakugou crossed his arms and glared at the villain before him. We got leads. If you're going to be such a fucking nuisance, maybe you can answer a few questions I have. Is Viper in Tokyo? Kirishima asked, his tone serious and demanding. We have strong evidence that he is, but we can't seem to pin him down. He gave Bakugou a sideways glance, a warning in his eye. If you're in contact with him, we'll see what we can do to make it up to you for your trouble in giving him up. I don't have a fucking clue about that shit. The informant continued his relaxed cycle of ball tosses. Yeah, he's in Tokyo, but where's? Fuck. I don't know. Bakugou shifted on his feet, silently communicating to Kirishima that he wants to push their luck. What about downtown? I've heard something about a corporate office of some sort. Is there a hideout there? The informant caught the ball but didn't throw it again, simply holding it in midair. He didn't respond for a few extra seconds, but when he did, his tone was flat. No. Kirishima noticed that Bakugou was beginning to dig through his pockets for his phone, but interrupted again to stop him. It's just a rumor, but we don't have any reason to believe that he'd be, well, dumb enough to put himself in such a vulnerable position. It was just a hunch. He turned toward the blonde. Ground zero. Pay the man. I'm not paying him shit. Bakugou balked at the command. He didn't give us anything workable. He's your informant. Kirishima narrowed his eyes at the blonde, hoping that his friend wasn't so dense that he couldn't see the obvious undertones to their conversation. I didn't even show him the dash. If you're not going to pay him, I will. Kirishima interrupted and began pulling out his wallet. Bakugou growled in frustration before he began to do the same. I'll be damned if you steal my fucking CI from me too, asshole. When I get back to work on Monday, your ass is grass. I'm putting you on the fucking grunt work shift, you hear me? Kirishima smirked. Want me to pick up your coffee in the morning too? Bakugou slammed a few bills into the informant's outstretched hand. You fucking better. He glowered at the informant as he tucked his wallet back into his back pocket. And you? He leaned down a bit to try and get a look at the man under the hood. Keep your Ravity's name out of your fucking mouth, got it? And you can tell Viper the same shit. She's one tough chick. That's how she recovered from Viper's stupid-ass poison gas. Maybe that shit is weaker than Viper thinks. The informant didn't get a chance to reply before Bakugou was leaving the alleyway, barking for Kirishima to follow. The redhead chanced one last glance at the informant before following. See you. Bakugou turned the corner after he exited the alley and began storming down the sidewalk. He heard Kirishima jog up beside him and turned a cold glare on his partner. The fuck was that? Edshot told me to show him the damn picture, but you kept getting in the way. Well, Kirishima huffed a breath, preparing himself to play mental parkour with the blonde. I didn't think that was a good idea, you know? It's our strongest physical lead, and you saw how he reacted when you brought up the downtown thing. Bakugou scoffed. So what? I'm supposed to start doubting my damn CI. No. Kirishima shook his head. I just don't think it's wise to give him all the information we have. He's supposed to inform you, remember? Not the other way around. Bakugou halted on the sidewalk to glare at the redhead. I've been paying that guy's rent for over a year now. He's never given me bad leads or any reason to question him. The fucker leeches off me, and I get to do my job better. It's a fucking win-win. Kirishima crossed his arms and stood his ground. Yeah, I agree that we can trust him because of all that prior stuff, but he only coughs up what the mushy rumor mill has been churning up. And, Bakugou, you have to remember what he said at the beginning. Viper is shaking things up. He said that Viper needs guys he can trust. What the fuck do you mean by that? Bakugou scowled at Kirishima, already working on compiling a long list of insults to use on the redhead in his mind. Don't you think it's a little strange for him to say that? Kirishima shrugged his broad shoulders. And don't forget, he reached out to you first. It used to be that you would have to pester that guy nonstop to so much as give up a potential quirking drug shipment. Bakugou paused and considered before scoffing a reply. It seems to me that he just wanted to fuck with me about Kachchako. I don't get the fucking fascination with her. Teller said the same shit when I was fighting him. Kirishima cocked his head carefully. Well, it is a little bit odd that she was able to recover from Viper's poisons so fast. She was good as new overnight. You remember that, don't you? TCH, Bakugou grunted. I have my own fucking suspicions about that, but it's none of their damn business, nor is it any of yours, Kirishima. Kirishima eyed his friend for a long moment. So, you think it was Eri too? Of course it fucking was. Bakugou shot back coldly. I just can't figure out why. Maybe it was the fucking pretty boy Mirio trying to get his foot in the door with Kachchako. It doesn't matter. Kirishima shrugged. It happened and Uraraka is better now. We need to focus on the leads we have, and despite how much you trust that guy, it's better to keep our hand hidden. It's fucking ridiculous that we came all the way out here and left with shit. Bakugou grumbled mostly to himself. Viper is here somewhere, hiding under our fucking noses, and we can't find a single thing that will give us a warrant to the building in downtown. It'll come, Kirishima shrugged. I have a feeling it'll come sooner rather than later. We're going to get him, dude. I don't need a damn pep talk. Bakugou glowered at the redhead. I need to get my fucking hands on that son of a bitch and blow his head off. Kirishima was quiet as he began following Bakugou down the sidewalk again. Bakugou was right when he said that they needed something more in order to pursue Viper any further. A new lead would give them what they needed to make a move, but what? He glanced at Bakugou's back and sighed. What if we talk to Teller's daughter again? Maybe she knows more than we think. Like hell she does. Bakugou sniffed irritably. She was pretty fucking useless apart from that one lead. Even still, we can't use that lead because it's nothing more than a witness statement. I don't know. Kirishima shrugged. Maybe she needs a gentler hand. What if I got permission for Uraraka to go see her? Bakugou glanced back at the redhead. Edshot isn't going to go for it. He barely sprung for me meeting with my informant. He'll spring, Kirishima shrugged. It's your case after all. The longer we wait, the harder it will be. I'm sure I can convince him. Bakugou didn't give a response, instead choosing to keep his gaze on the path ahead of him. Kirishima simply acknowledged that Bakugou was grumpy, but it didn't change the offer in his mind. He'd try on their behalf to bring them back in on the case. It just wasn't working without Bakugou's leadership and Uraraka's intelligence. They were needed now more than ever. Uraraka hummed happily as she carefully licked the spoon inside her mouth before pulling it out. This was a great idea. Bakugou mindlessly poked at the mochi in his paper bowl as they walked down a street in Mizutofu. They were much earlier than he'd anticipated, so he'd caved when Uraraka had pointed out the sweet shop along the way. The late morning sun felt good in contrast to the chilly breeze blowing in from the north. It felt good to escape from Tokyo for a day, even if it was for work and a dreaded media appearance. He glanced at the girl walking beside him and smirked. While he was meeting with his informant yesterday, Uraraka had championed her way through the interview. In fact, it had gone so well that Uravity trended online for a few hours. She was widely popular now, and it showed in her hero ranking. She'd narrowed the gap between them quite a bit. All she needed now was a huge heroic act to cement her place. "Are you sure that you're going to be okay on your own?" Bakugou blinked, broken away from his musings about her. "What? The show?" Uraraka shrugged as she began breaking off another bite of mochi. "Are you really going to be alright doing it by yourself?" "Yeah." Bakugou grunted irritably, remembering the television appearance he was scheduled for later that day. Uraraka deserved a break from everything, so it was his turn to take the heat. The sooner it's over, the better. Uraraka giggled. "Just don't snap at anyone, okay?" "I can't promise that," Bakugou growled out and looked down at his paper bowl. His appetite was suddenly gone as he visualized being around media personalities, asking him uncomfortable personal questions. Uraraka let her shoulder bump against his as they walked. "Well, we're almost done with all this. It's going to feel so good when it's all over, right?" Bakugou gave her a sideways glance as he tried to decipher what she'd said through her full cheeks. "Didn't anyone ever teach you to chew your fucking food?" Uraraka hummed and shrugged teasingly. "Didn't anyone teach you that it's impolite to not finish your food?" He glanced down at the bowl again before passing it off to her. "Since you love this crap so much, why don't you finish it for me?" Uraraka shoveled another bite past her lips as she nodded enthusiastically and took it from his hands. He didn't mind her goofing off, and it showed when he smirked at her before softly shaking his head. "I should head out soon." Uraraka agreed and came to a stop on the sidewalk. "Want me to walk there with you?" "No, you should go do whatever you want. Go shopping or some shit, I don't care. Just take a break." Uraraka lifted the paper bowl. "I think I'll go for seconds." "I fucking called that," Bakugou mumbled before checking the time on his phone. "No, you didn't." Uraraka giggled and moved to stand directly in front of him. "Are you going?" "Yeah." Bakugou sighed regrettably. "Fuck this shit. I'd rather get an earful from Ed's shot than go to this stupid thing." "I believe in you." Uraraka stood up on her tiptoes to get a better look at him. "And it's only a few hours. You'll be fine. Just text me if you get mad." Bakugou sniffed at her and glanced around to see a few other people walking on the sidewalk. Nobody was paying attention to them, so he leaned forward and gave her a swift peck on the forehead before brushing past her. "I'll call you when it's over." "I'll meet you at UA afterward." Uraraka blushed as she called after him. "Have fun." Bakugou didn't respond before begrudgingly wandering down the sidewalk, and Uraraka watched after him, her mochi forgotten in her hands. The small kiss had made her body flutter with adoration, and she was sad to see him go. Even though they had spent all week together, she couldn't help but feel a little sad to see him go ahead to the show without her. She almost went after him before she stopped herself. He was right, she needed a break. She swiveled on her heel and looked around at the town before taking off in a familiar direction. She had a few hours to kill, and seeing bombshells sounded like fun. After her last visit to Mizutofu, she hadn't gotten a chance to update the blonde heroine on all the things they'd talked about, so now seemed as good a time as any. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she looked down. "Katsuki, I'm already fucking pissed." She giggled aloud at the message before replying. "Ochiko. Well, just remember that your biggest fan is rooting for you. You'll be great." She admired the hometown feel that Mizutofu offered after tucking her phone away in her purse. The shops were all private small businesses, and the people were much softer here. Truthfully, she missed living there sometimes when she compared it to Tokyo. Everything in Mizutofu felt safe and calm, while Tokyo felt cramped and wild. However, if she hadn't taken the leap to Tokyo, she would have never gotten to be with Bakugou, and that was enough of a reason to love Tokyo infinitely more. As she meandered her way through the city, she allowed herself to get distracted with whatever drew her attention. Small trinket shops lured her in with happy music, and propped open doors and determined food cart owners beckoned her with delicious smells. After an hour passed, she found herself further away from Bombshell's agency than when Bakugou had left her. Eventually, She turned a corner onto a very familiar street. She used to come here all the time to visit one shop in particular. A tiny jewelry shop on the corner felt like it pulled her in by a string, and before she knew it, she was pushing the door open and sounding the bell to announce her arrival. "Can I help you?" the old woman behind the counter asked before looking up at her. "Oh my, look who it is." "Chiyoko." Uraraka greeted her with a bright smile. "How are you?" The woman shook her head, forcing her glasses to slide down her nose. "The same as I was a year ago, my dear. It's been so long." Uraraka made her way to the glass cases that Chiyoko was standing behind and looked down through them. "What do you have?" The old woman slid the back open and reached in. "I've been saving this one for you. I knew you'd find your way here sometime or another." Uraraka watched as the woman carefully plucked a charm from the assortment on display and set it on top of the glass case. It was a delicate-looking star with pink gemstones tastefully placed on each point. "Oh wow, it's beautiful." Chiyoko smiled warmly down at the charm. "When I saw it, the first thing I thought was Uravity. I knew it would fit in your collection." "May I?" Uraraka reached for the tiny charm, and when Chiyoko nodded, she lifted it up and placed it gently in her palm to get a better look. "I love it." The woman watched her admire the piece of jewelry before she chuckled and cleared her throat. "It's yours. Consider it a gift." "Oh no." Uraraka immediately shook her head. "I'll pay you for it." "How much?" Chiyoko peered at the brunette with a humored look before shaking her head. "How about a favor?" "What would you like?" Uraraka gave a puzzled frown. "Come visit again the next time you're in Mizutofu." Chiyoko shrugged. "And you have to promise me that you'll wear this charm." Uraraka smiled back down at the little piece in her hand as she envisioned it on her charm bracelet. She bought the band from Chiyoko after graduation, and she'd come back to purchase charms for it whenever she needed a pick-me-up. She'd amassed a small collection of adorable charms ranging from stones to bells and other delicately made pieces. It was her most treasured piece of jewelry, and she only wore it for special occasions. This charm would be a beautiful addition. "You have a deal, Chiyoko." "Wonderful." The woman smiled and leaned in. "But dear Ochiko, I see you're dating a handsome new man." "Oh gosh." Uraraka blushed and laughed airily. "It's all anyone wants to talk about." Chiyoko laughed before it fell into a humored fit of coughs. "He's a hot-blooded one. I can see that much." "You have no idea." Uraraka replied mostly under her breath as she tried to distract herself by looking at the charm. The old woman fought off the remnants of her fit before waddling over to her cash register and pulling a magazine out from underneath it. The pages were well worn, and it was clear it had been looked through many times. "Well, I won't trouble you with details, but since you're here, I'll have to ask you for your autograph." Uraraka watched as Chiyoko slid the magazine over the counter, and she saw that it was a few months old now. The cover was a snapshot of her during the Kihin fight, and the headline read, "Uravity, a new generation of heroine." "I knew you were a tough cookie." Chiyoko pushed her glasses up and smiled at the brunette from across the counter. "But it's nice to see it on the front page." She reached for a marker with a faded label and placed it on top of the magazine. "Well, come on, Ochiko. Don't be shy." Uraraka smiled warmly before picking up the marker and signing the front of the magazine, addressing Chiyoko by name. "I'll have you know, I don't do this for just anyone anymore. You should feel special, Chiyoko." The woman grunted with a knowing smirk. "That new boyfriend is rubbing off on you, I see." "Wadash," Uraraka sputtered and blushed. "Okay, you got me." There were many more probing questions that followed that one, but Uraraka answered them all, unafraid that the jewelry shop owner would keep her honesty private. It felt good to speak frankly, and although Uraraka had talked about bakugou all week, she didn't feel like she got to speak so intimately about him in public. Chiyoko had always been a good listener and a staunch advocate for Uraraka moving to Tokyo. Reflecting on it now, Uraraka wished that she'd taken the old woman's advice years ago. "Inko and I talk about you a lot." Uraraka blinked. "Inko still comes by." "Couple times a week now." Chiyoko shrugged. "She moved in around the corner a few months back. She's lonely without Izuku around, so she comes by in the evenings." "Oh." Uraraka's tone turned soft and sorrowful. "How is she? Is she well?" Chiyoko laughed as she shrugged. Well, Izuku doesn't call as often as she likes, but she's well enough. Bored, mostly. Uraraka sighed forlornly. I have to say, I do miss her from time to time. Well, go see her. Chiyoko motioned to the door. I can give you her address. No. Uraraka shook her head hard. That would be inappropriate. Chiyoko laughed harder now. Why? Just because you and Izuku aren't together anymore doesn't mean that you have to distance yourself. Poor thing could use your company. She misses you sorely. Uraraka carefully handed back the charm when Chiyoko pulled out a piece of tissue paper to wrap it up. Wouldn't that be weird? I mean, going to see my ex-boyfriend's mom doesn't seem like a very good idea. Oh, she won't tell Izuki. Chiyoko carefully wrapped up the charm and reached for a small paper bag. She liked having you around for herself, you know. You're the daughter she never had. I don't know. Uraraka hummed uncomfortably. It doesn't seem right. Chiyoko tucked the charm away in the bag and reached for a scrap of receipt paper. Tell you what, Ochiko. I'll write down her address, and you can decide for yourself. Let me just say this, though. She'd be thrilled to see you. I am sure she has a few questions of her own that Izuku wouldn't dare answer honestly. She loves her son, but she and I would talk a lot about you going to Tokyo back in the day. She knew, and she tried telling Izuku. It's just a woman's luck that the good ones always have deaf ears. Uraraka frowned in confusion, but before she could ask for clarification, Chiyoko piped up jovially. That's why I'm happy to see you with a good-looking one. They're the ones with good listening ears. Uraraka flushed in embarrassment. That's not, well. She trailed off and blushed. He'd probably kill you for that, you know? Let him. Chiyoko snorted humorously. These old bones don't have much fight left in them, but my tongue is sharper than a whip. Wisdom comes with age, and with wisdom comes the greatest humblings for brash young men. Uraraka hesitantly accepted Ingo's address when Chiyoko held it out to her. It was wonderful to see you, Chiyoko. Come see me again soon. The old woman pulled the signed magazine from the top of the counter to look at it. And work on that autograph, please. It's messy. You're a lady hero, so your autograph needs some elegance and flair. Uraraka scoffed. You're one to talk about elegance and flair. That's that boyfriend again. Chiyoko pointed at her using the magazine. He's doing a good job. Uraraka brushed her comment off and grabbed up the little paper bag. I'll be sure to pop in the next time I'm in town. I'll make sure to bring Katsuki too, so I can see that wisdom go to work. The pleasure would be all mine. Chiyoko gave her a warm elderly smile and watched as the brunette waved and exited the shop, ringing the little bell as she went. Once on the street again, Uraraka glanced down at the paper in between her fingers and sighed. She glanced down the long street to her right and shrugged internally. She wasn't nearly rude enough to intrude on Inko after coldly dumping her son, but her curiosity was enough to convince her that a simple walk by wouldn't hurt. She looped the handles of the paper bag around her wrist and began walking. So that's it for today. If you liked the video, leave a like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell. And if you want to contribute to the entire story being illustrated, just read the information in the description below.